Hi, everybody. Melissa again, and just continuing on with the Mirror Mirror adventure. And here's the wash that I'd done, and I just, I came back to it, and I saw that there were some slight changes I needed to make. And I wanted to say there's a great advantage to just letting your eyes rest for a few minutes, even if you just walk away for ten minutes or so and come back. Often you'll notice things that you didn't notice before. So that's a good technique for just give yourself a break. There I'm using my favorite crow feather. One of the things I love about that crow feather is that it's kind of beat up, like or it might even be a raven feather, because there are ravens where I live. But it's beat up, and I identify with things that are beat up. Like it's got some history. So that wing or that feather, it gives you a sense of how hard that feather worked for the wing of that bird. Here what I'm doing is I'm just adding a light wash over the hand of, and there's no pearl white in this one. It's just mostly yellow ochre and a little bit of red in it. And then I'm also adding painting some shadow effects in the crevices between the fingers. And my original hope for this was that I could just do this light wash over my hand, and I'd be good. I'd be done. Because the idea was the pencil and the shading on the pencil would do most of the work of that. Um, Unfortunately, I figured, I was like, oh, I think I need to. I kept adding on and on. When I look at this now, I'm like, actually, that was kind of working. So I think I overworked myself. Here I'm adding just the some shadows around the mirror frame, which was sort of a translucent effect. And now I'm doing the books. There's bookshelves of books that I really love, that I've lugged around from Philadelphia to Hawaii to here in a few different locations. And I just can't give up my art books, it seems. I have shed over the years some things, but there, I feel like these are my artist friends that travel with me and are part of my who I am in some ways. Who knows? I mean, you can't take it with you, can you? So one cool thing about looking at a bookshelf with lots of books on it is it kind of makes this sort of mosaic of different colors and tones, and sort of trying to figure out, like, all right, what are the colors in there without making it be pop forward too much. And Seeing, because books come in all sorts of different colors and shades. I love doing sort of textures on patinas of copper or metals or things like that. I find, like, as the copper oxidizes, then you just have all these different colors, from greens and browns and blues. The more you look, the more you see. And of course, golds and pinks and things like that. From the top, you can see how pink the inside of the cup is. But the outside is much darker than the inside. Um, so that's just something to kind of be aware of. And then also painting the highlights around the rim and really trying to get that rim. Again, I keep talking about how some of these more man-made forms, or these certain things, you just have to you really want to try to hold yourself to getting them right. Um, and just making those little adjustments. If there's a funny little bump, take it out. And Here I think I'm starting to get into, yeah, I'm painting around the outside of the cup and refining this shape. I'm really refining that rim from both sides, and the shape of the cup from both the inside of the cup as well as the outside. I'm also realizing that I really don't like how I painted the handle of the cup. If you compare the handle of the cup that's in the mirror to the one that's outside the mirror, the one in the mirror is actually more accurate. It's got that kind of almost like a half heart shape. And the one outside is like a C shape. And I'm like, no. Um, and, even though they say with watercolor it is harder, it is true, it's a little bit harder to cover things up. I was like, you know what, I'm going to still try. Um, One thing that's also kind of cool is that, whatever tones are on the outside of the mirror, are on the inside. So, lots of little tricky, transitions with this. Like I can almost call this the painting about, how little different edges meet and overlap, and how getting those little intersections of one object over another, or one object to another, like in that case, like the bookcase looks like it's now coming out of my arm, for some reason. And so I probably need to go back, and I think I do at some point, strengthen the plane of my arm, so my arm doesn't have a weird stick growing out of it. So there's that. Painting the pencil in. What's ironic is now, I started this with a pencil, so I drew a pencil in my hand, and now I'm mostly working with a brush painting the pencil that never got, yeah, so it's sort of like one of those Escher things. Oh, there I am, I'm redrawing the handle, and kind of going over it with a pretty thick layer of yellow ochre, and then the fabulous Pro White over that. But it's even just a little too thick, so I'm actually kind of using that to pull into other areas. So it's almost like I've got this pool of paint on my painting, because I do, and then I'm using that to put that color into other places, almost like you would like your cake pan, or your, from your palette. So that's kind of a cool thing you can do. Doing the feather, like whenever I got frustrated, I'd be like, okay, fine, I'm doing the feather. I love the feather. The feather's easy, and fun, and I know exactly how to do this. So that feels really good, and loving it. There are like lots of little subtle sheens on the feather. Here I'm noticing that the key has kind of some browns in among the gray, as well as the gray overall basic impression of the key. Refining shapes again. It looks like I'm revisiting that. It was also the other thing is giving one area if you find like in one area of the painting it's getting too wet, move to another area and work on that instead, and try to keep your hand out of it. I don't always do so great with that, but I try. And going around again. One thing that's kind of interesting about this painting is, as many of you have seen, like when I go to do the highlights on objects, I'll pull out the Pro White and, mix that color up and, give yourself. But for the rim of this cup, I chose to not use any Pro White at all. So that's all just the white of the paper showing through. I just decided I liked how it looked, and I was like, I don't need to do that in this case. So, yeah. I have to say, though, the cup looks a little bit dinged up a bit, and it's not. It's like, we could pretend that this cup was at some party and somebody crashed, I beat somebody's head with it. That's why it's so dinged up looking, but no, that didn't happen. It's had a very peaceful existence. Peaceful, happy existence, being occasionally used for making Moscow mules or things like that. I like a juniper mule, which involves gin, which did not agree with me. Apparently, I can't hold my booze. Just a splash, I swear. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm adding the shadows. I just did a light wash over the feather and created a shadow effect. So instead of doing this, and that worked really well. And I had also noticed that there were areas that were white of the paper where, I hadn't laid down a wash. And so I just laid a light wash over it, and it worked super good and really looked like a shadow. There I'm just adding, kind of going around the rim of the mirror and darkening it a bit, and so much of this is just refine, and really going into those little cracks and stuff. There's an awkward little section where I'm like, oh geez, the bookshelves sort of end at this awkward place. How do I want to handle that? And the answer is very carefully. And here's where I'm going more and more into, my hand and adding highlights and getting into the Pro White. I said at one point my arm looked dirty, and I'm like, it's not dirty. So, um, mixing the Pro White with some flesh tones as well. Going back into the cup and just, I find with these sort of metal textures and patinas, you can add so much to it. And it seems to, looks better and better the more you add to it. Um, Now, one of the things I ran into with the mirror was that it really didn't have, like, I had a very clear, the way it was set up, it was a very clear reflection of my hand and the bookcases and the cup. And there wasn't like any real highlights on the mirror. That, and, which is a shame because I've seen some beautiful paintings that show mirrors where you see a little bit of the reflected image, but then it's also just the sort of shininess or darkness or highlights and things. Different lighting situations create different situations. One thing I'm noticing is the bright blue of that mechanical pencil is really popping in a way that I don't like. So I'll probably, I didn't notice it while I was painting it, but now I'm looking at the film. I'm going, yeah, I think I'm going to change that color to something else that's more, I don't know, congruent with the rest of the palette of this painting, which is sort of a very warm, warm reds and ochres with like some black punches to it. There are some tiny touches of green around the edge of the mirror, a little bit in the bookcase as well. So thank you so much for watching. I very, very much appreciate it. And take my advice, don't do as I do, do as I say. Have a great day.